How to embed a Notion page in a React website. How do we get the content from this Notion page onto this website without using an iframe? We're going to use the React Notion package and the Notion API worker package and use the worker to make a GET request from the API and send that JSON request to the React Notion and render it. Let's write some code. So first we're going to use our utils API and use the actions package to make a GET request to the Notion API hosted by SplitB. Then, when our component mounts, we're going to load the Notion page and set the response to our page data. And then we're going to use Notion Renderer to render the Notion page. React Notion doesn't have support for table of contents, but that's okay because I wrote this Gist, which is open source, and you can use it to dynamically create your own table of contents. And there you have it, the best of React and the best of Notion. Truly the best of both worlds. For more details on how I did this and to watch the full video, check out the blog on my website. I'm going to show you how to embed a Notion page in a React website. I want to give you the information as quickly as possible without all the fluff, so I'm going to jump right into why you might want to do this and why this feature is so powerful and useful. Then I'm going to just give you the solution and the next steps right away. And if you want to keep watching, you can, because I'm going to talk about how I arrived at the solution and walk you through some of the things that I did along the way and my thought process. If you want to access the links in this Google Doc, I also wrote a blog post as well with all the links included, so you can check that out. Let's get to it. So why do you want to embed a Notion page in a React website? So React websites are a really good framework for designing interactive web apps, right? So if you have interactive features, you want to click buttons, you want to like filter it by different things, if you want to like log in, sign up, all that kind of stuff, React is really good for that kind of thing. However, what happens if you have a content heavy page that needs to be updated frequently? Right, so like you have a page like this where it's just really static content they need to like be able to make quick changes to. Enter something like Notion, right? Something like Notion is excellent for this, right? It's like if you want to have, let's say you want to change this from 3 to 2, you just do that, and it should update in a couple like seconds, and then you can just go in incognito, and then everyone who basically has access to this link will be able to see the new update. See, there you go, just like that. If you wanted to do the same thing in React, it would just be a huge hassle, right? It's like, first of all, you have to basically go into raw HTML code, find where you want to make your change. And if you're using like staging in prod environments, if you're using GitHub, you have to push and you have to like deploy to your CDN. This is a huge pain. Compared to Notion, which I just showed you, is literally like 2 steps. So why don't we get the best of both worlds? Why don't we just basically take the CMS engine of Notion and directly embed it into my React website? Maybe instead of thinking embed Notion into a website, I should think about it in terms of embed Notion into React. And I tried to do that, and then the first thing I found was this. So how do I get React Notion into my React website? So I fire up my server, okay, so you should always check out a new branch, all that kind of stuff. npm install React Notion -- save. I don't even know if actually -- save is necessary. But anyway, so npm install React Notion, and then you can do that. So then, okay, let me put together a diagram to help me understand what's going on. So it's not, so Notion, that Notion page actually isn't raw HTML. So unlike React, where Notion just basically shows the data as raw HTML, it's stored in the database as a JSON, and the data gets sent from API to the Notion page in the format of a JSON. And so what I originally wanted to do with React Notion X was build my own Notion client that would directly request from the Notion API and then send it to my React Notion X and display the information. What React Notion does instead is it has its own Notion API worker, typo, and you can just use the Notion API worker and send that to React Notion, so it sort of does the work for you. So what we have to do essentially then, so then the solution is, we just heard, first of all, we need to have a service that will basically go and fetch the data from a Notion API, and we're going to replace Notion API, Notion page ID with the page ID from our website. So the page ID from your website, the page ID for your React Notion page is just like the last fragment of the slug. So you can just take that and you can just put that in the URL. And so first of all, the way I recommend to do these types of things is that you want to have like a utility, you want to have a service. So like here I have so I'll show you the file path so you can see /services. And so you can have a service here called Notion client. And so I'm using the Axios library, and basically it's also going to make a GET request to this URL for this page ID. So first step 1 is basically get, so that's step 1. Get the page ID from the Notion API. Once we have that, you're going to go into your code and you're going to basically call load Notion content. So first thing you want to do is you want to basically have, you want to get your state variables. So create a state variable loading a Notion page data. Then in component did mount, you're going to call load Notion page data. And essentially what it's going to do, first of all, you should always have some sort of loading UI thing. Basically, anytime you have to make a network request, you should always try to have something to let the user know what's going on. It's just like a good UX practice. Then you're going to call load Notion content. Now, what most people might probably want to do is they might just want to directly go here, copy this, and just do something like this, which is kind of, I mean, you can do it, but I just prefer to just assign variables as much as possible. So just at the top of your thing, you define the page ID for the Notion. Try to comment things as much as you can. And then, so once you do that, you load Notion content. Then when it's finished loading, you want to set Notion page data to the response from your API. And then finally, when everything is done, you're going to set loading to false. That's it. So now you've got the data. So now you have the data from your JSON, and now it's in your React. Now it's in your React code. Step 2 is you want to render this information. So that's where React Notion comes in. So you're going to npm install React Notion -- save, run that, and you're going to basically import Notion renderer from React Notion. Once you've called impact Notion render from the React Notion, all you're going to do here is you're going to basically use Notion renderer and block map. You're going to set it to the Notion page data, which you set here when you got the data from your API, and which you're getting from the state, right? So now we have here Notion renderer as a block map. And once you do all that steps, you should have something that looks like this. Nope, you should have something that looks like this. Okay, so once you do all that, you should have something that looks like this. Wait a minute, what's going on here? Why does, it's supposed to look like this. Why does this one look so ugly? So now here I was stuck for a while. Then what I did was I made sure to go and look at the documentation more carefully. Right? Always remember, read the docs. Always read documentation carefully. Here we go. Import React Notion source styles.css. So actually, we actually don't even need this. So I'm actually going to remove this because that way I can save my file size. But here, we need to basically import React Notion style sheets. So I'm showing you this because I made that same mistake. So make sure you import the React Notion style sheet. Also, you may not actually need to import this in the same place your Notion renderer is used. So I'm just going to import this in my app.js file. And there you go, much nicer. Okay, the only thing missing now is that, like, let's say for example I wanted to jump to, like, what's a page? Let's say I wanted to jump to like how much does it cost, or can other people contribute to a scholarship? All right. So right now the way it's currently set, up, I have to like scroll all the way to bottom to get to what I'm looking for. I need a table of contents. Now React Notion doesn't support a table of contents, as we went over already here. But fortunately, we can build our own table of contents. So basically, I wrote this code snippet called create table of contents. And basically what it does is that, and it goes through all the header elements in a given HTML file. It's like all this stuff. And it just basically automatically turns it into a list, which you can click to and jump to where you're looking for on the screen. I've shared this as a gist on my GitHub. So if you want access to that code, here, you can just go to my gist.github.com/ademadun, and then you can just copy paste my code snippet and put it in your code. So once we have that, we're going to go back to our how to start a scholarship, and then we're going to go to this thing here, and we're going to say what create table of contents is going to basically, so what we're going to do is like after we've set the state, so basically after we set Notion data, we're then going to call create table of contents. And there you have it, a dynamically created table of contents. So now, if we want to go into can other people contribute to scholarship, we just sort of, and it takes us exactly what we want. Another thing I would recommend, you should try to have maybe some sort of scroll to the top that allows users to go back to where they're looking for. And then if they want to If they want to do other stuff, they can just easily go back and forth like that. So for mine, I use Backtop, and I got that from the Ant Design package, which is the package that which is the design library we use in our React website, which I would also recommend. Another thing that I like to do, but it's not necessary, is I have this thing called scroll to element, and maybe I'll also put this on my Okay, so it's actually pretty self-explanatory, so maybe I don't need to necessarily share this as a gist. But basically, essentially what it does is that if there's a hashtag or if there's a hash in your URL, it'll automatically scroll to that element, which is just another way to save people time. So for example, let's say I want to tell a user, so let me go to the actual main website again. So let's say, for example, I want to tell them, oh, how does the messaging feature work? I can just send them this link, and then instead of them having to scroll all the way down, I just send them that link and then opening incognito. It automatically scrolls to the element that is relevant to them, right? That way they don't it's just another way to save your user time. So the way you implement that is, one of the things that I found is that I have to put a set timeout. So I wait about 500 milliseconds, and after the milliseconds is done, you can just scroll to element and it'll take you to the location hash. So something that's optional, you don't have to do, but it's another way to make your user's life easier. And that's it. The final thing I wanted to say is creating a generic Notion embed page. So like I mentioned right now, this code is sort of hard-coded to work in how to start a scholarship. Now, for example, like I have another page called how to apply for a scholarship, which would also benefit from this whole Notion embedding thing. Now, the way my code is currently set up is that I basically need to re-implement this entire logic again for this exact same page when the only thing that's really changed is the page ID. Everything else is going to be the exact same. Like, we're going to load the Notion page, we're going to scroll to element, we're going to want to create a table of contents. So actually, the next step, and what you can probably do for your own exercise if you want, is you want to create a generic Notion embed page component like this. So actually, then all this thing would do is, you would sort of just remove all this stuff, and then you would sort of just have something like Notion page, and page ID is equal to, right? And then in the how to apply for scholarships component, you would sort of remove all this stuff, right? Notion page ID, and then just set that to how to apply for scholarship, Notion page ID. And then so you basically make your own custom like touch Notion embed.js component. Right, so that's sort of another thing that you could do to sort of make your code more generic and abstracted. So let's undo that. Let's undo that. And there you have it. And there you have it. The best of React and the best of Notion combined. Hope you found this video useful. Peace. One peculiar issue you might run into is that sometimes your request might randomly fill with a CORS error. If this is the case, you can usually just keep trying and it might work eventually. And when you do get it to work, you want to right-click Inspect, go to the Network tab, and you want to find the request to get the API. You want to go to your response. You want to copy all of this. Use something like JSON editor. And then you want to, you don't have to do this part, but this is just something that makes things easier for you. And then you want to basically save it as a URL. I mean, save it to a JSON file. So now I'm just going to call this one Notion Start Scholarships data.json. And then you're going to basically, so what they recommend doing here is that you're going to take that JSON file, and just like they did here, you're going to save this JSON file into your component. So for example, like what I could do, I can just copy this into here, right? And then what you're going to do is you can just basically load your block map like this. So import response from right? And then you're going to basically go here, and then, so then if it fails, whoops, change the file name. And then what I'm going to do is that instead of, when I call load Notion page, instead of calling the API, I can actually just comment out all this stuff. I can just comment out all that stuff, and all I really need right here is this piece of code. Comment out all this stuff. And then set state from Notion page data to be response.recordMap.block. So we can look carefully at the documentation. Load a page chunk. And there you have it. So now we can either dynamically get the content using the API, or we can get the content from the API once and save it to a JSON file, and then just save it to a JSON file. And of course, you can remember, you can also, and what they recommend doing is they say that if you use the Notion API, they also recommend that you can't basically guarantee it'll stay stable, and they also say you can also host it yourself. So that's another option you can look into. So now you're probably thinking, okay, well, just use an iframe. So there's a couple of things. First of all, iframes, they're not actually they're not a clean solution for including content in a different website. So for example, like there's this page, I think, high school students, right? So there's this page I have, and the way, so instead of like putting the blog post in the thing, I embedded it as an iframe. And you'll see with the iframe, it doesn't look very nice, right? Because you have like all the footers and all that kind of stuff from the main website embedded again, right? Yeah, you have it, so, and like it's like really, and then it's also the thing, like it takes a long time to load. It's just not very native and integrated. And another problem you'll see with this is that, for example, you can't natively integrate with the content on this page. So for example, like there's like a lot of static content here that I might want to interact with, and you can't do that because it's like not a native part of your website. And this will make more sense later on. And also, by the way, it wouldn't even work anyway. If you try to embed a Notion iframe in a React website, you're going to run into security issues. So this is what it looks like on Firefox. If you try to use it on Chrome, it's not going to work either. And the reason for this is that Notion has some sort of same origin restriction, so basically prohibits iframes from being used in other websites. So now at this point, we want to go to our trusted friend Google, and say embed Notion into website. So this is what I did. So then I said, okay, let me Google embed Notion into website, and I clicked on the first couple of links. And then, so yeah, so basically all of these were kind of saying the same thing, that it doesn't work. And then I came across an interesting post, and I kept on reading, and I saw this person's comment. All right, and then I read his blog post about basically integrating Notion and Netlify. And then he was talking about something here about reverse engineering the Notion API. And then I was like, like I think he wrote a Go library somewhere. Yeah. So then I saw this. So then I saw this, I'm like, maybe I'm thinking about this in the wrong way. Maybe I should think about this from a coding perspective. Maybe instead of thinking embed Notion into a website, I should think about it in terms of embed Notion into React. And I tried to do that, and then the first thing I found was this. And so like I read the documentation, it looks super interesting, but then I see a problem, table of contents. Now this for me, like this might not be an issue for you, but for me this was a big problem because you can see there's a lot of content on this page. The table of content helps the reader jump to exactly what is relevant for them. Okay, so that's no good. But I see it's supported by React Notion X. So I go to React Notion X, and then I read it, and then first of all, I'm not. So it seems like a super cool thing, but then I realize this thing here, Notion client, basically requires you to set up your own like server in order to serve in order to basically query the Notion API. So then I'm like, man, like this is a huge hassle. Like I don't think it's worth the effort. And but I'm thinking maybe it's worth it because if I end up using Notion for like a lot of my different pages, like so for example, another page that I would want to embed Notion in. Right, so this is another page that's pretty much just static content and has a Notion equivalent as well. So like maybe if I'm using, so basically I'm thinking maybe if I'm using it often, it'd be really useful. So maybe it's actually worth, investing the time to set up a microserver to serve this content. So then I tried to do that and then I actually run into an issue, and I filed an issue here. And I have to give a lot of credit to Travis because he replied super quick to my problem. So shout out Travis. But anyway, so then while I'm sort of waiting for Travis to reply, so he replied super quick and I'm sort of waiting for him to reply. Okay, so he replied, so what did he say? So then he replies again, and he sort of says something about Node and versioning, and like, okay, this is like going to be a huge hassle. Let me just go back to Notion. Let me go back and see what React Notion is saying. Let me see what my man is saying, and let's see if I can figure this out. Okay, so they're not supporting table of contents. And wait a second, I could just do my own table of contents. So how do I get React Notion into my React website? So I fire up my server. Okay, so you should always check out a new branch, all that kind of stuff. npm install React Notion -- save. I don't even know if actually -- save is necessary, but anyway, so npm install React Notion, and then you can do that. So reading the documentation, it basically, so what he says here is that he's somehow storing the API response in a JSON file and importing it. What does that mean? So then I go back to Kowalczyk and I didn't actually read it. I just kind of skimmed it and I just looked at the screenshots. I'm saying, oh, so that's how Notion works. So essentially what Notion does is you're seeing static HTML content here. But what Notion is actually doing is that if you right click and you inspect and you go to your network tab, what you see is, you basically see that the way Notion works is, and let me see if I can find it. I'm like load cached page chunk. It actually saves the data in the database as a JSON file. So all this content that you're seeing is actually a JSON file in the back end, right? Right. So for example, you see something here about Enter Scholarship Details. Enter Scholarship Details is pretty much actually just a JSON file, and then it gets rendered into HTML on the Notion front end. Right. So you can see that kind of for like all these different other stuff too. Okay, so then at this point I'm realizing, okay, so what we really need to do is we need to sort of query the Notion API ourselves. Now, if you try to query the Notion API directly, it won't work. So what they do here is they have this thing basically, it's called a Notion API worker. And so there's, and so things here, now this is where things get a little bit more complicated, so I won't go into too much detail. So then, okay, let me put together a diagram to help me understand what's going on. So it's not, so that Notion page actually isn't raw HTML. So unlike React, where Notion just basically shows the data as raw HTML, it's stored in the database as a JSON, and the data gets sent from API to the Notion page in the format of a JSON. And so what I originally wanted to do with React Notion X was build my own Notion client that would directly request from the Notion API and then send it to my React Notion X and display the information. What React Notion does instead is it has its own Notion API worker, typo, and you can just use the Notion API worker and send that to React Notion, so it sort of does the work for you. And there you have it. The best of React and the best of Notion combined. Hope you found this video useful. Peace.